everyone, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap up, and I'm not gonna lie, I thought I didn't read very much this month, and then I gathered a total of 8 books to talk about today, which was a little surprising. That being said, I read some all-time faves this month, a few disappointing books, but regardless, I'm really excited to chat through all of them. So the first book I'm going to quickly mention and review, because I feel like I have talked about it a lot on my channel. You can see a plethora of reading vlogs where I'm basically destroyed by this book over and over again, and that is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. This is the first book to the Live Ship Traders trilogy, and I have to say this is not only my favorite Robin Hobb book of all time so far, but also one of my favorite fantasy novels of all time. It was just a masterclass in multi-POV character work, an expansive world, dramatic plot lines, and honestly a harrowing story that will just kind of rip you to shreds, but it's also a really cathartic reading experience at the same time. But as I said, this is a multi-POV fantasy story, and it's a very large book, and the first novel is really just kicking things off. Like, there is a lot to be explored and a lot to experience, and I can tell that just by only having read this guy. But as I mentioned, this isn't just like a 4 or 5 POV book, this is like a 12 or 13 POV book. But please do not be intimidated by that, because it's actually very easy to follow. And I would say too that the characters are kind of clustered together with their own separate storylines, but also everything does feel very interconnected. And as things begin to kind of coalesce together, it is satisfying, but usually heartbreaking. But this is a series centered around trading and piracy, and essentially you follow a group of characters. Some of them are traders trying to like capture their fortune. Some of them are trying to kind of excel beyond societal expectations and sort of just find their place on ships. And the last group are pirates who are also emancipators, one of which is looking to become the pirate king. But everything is very much centered on the water and the port cities that kind of fuel this sort of trade empire. And there's also an element of that the magic is actually centered around charming objects. And so a large part of that is actually there's something called live ships, which are ships that are in fact very much alive, have their own personalities, and are very like sought after, and they also take a lot of blood and money to kind of come into fruition. But yes, this was the first book in the trilogy. I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It is heartbreaking, but again, just astonishingly beautiful. Robin Hobb creates characters that you just feel for in every way. They feel so human and so dynamic. They make mistakes. Sometimes you want to shake them, sometimes you want to hug them, but at the end of the day, you will always want to read about them. At least I do. But yeah, this was amazing. Loved it. Can't wait to read book 2. From there, I picked up another home run, a new all-time fave, and that is Jade City by Fonda Lee. This was so excellent. This book definitely had a lot of hype when I picked it up, and it followed through in every way, shape, and form, which was an absolute relief. And I also found out that it's going to be adapted into a television series, which just feels so right. Like, you read this and you're like, this would just be so excellent on screen. That being said, Jade City is an Asian-inspired urban fantasy story, and it's primarily set in one central city of Kekon, and this city is kind of divided and controlled by 2 major crime families, and at the center of the crime families there's something called jade. So jade is a substance that is only able to be mined in the area, and not everyone can actually use or touch it. If you are able to leverage jade, you basically become stronger faster than everyone else, so it's very much controlled and sought after by these 2 crime families, and they also control the jade trade. However, when a new substance kind of starts to leak its way onto the market, which allows kind of a general individual to start using jade, a turf war and a possible family war begins to bubble between these 2 families. This book has literally everything you would ever want in a fantasy story. First off, there is incredible city and family politics, the drama and the undercurrent of tension that is present between almost every scene in this book, particularly when it has to deal with the contrasting family. It is just so amazing. Combining the fact we also have internal family drama. This is a multi-POV story following different high-level individuals within one of the primary crime families. You also have such well-written action. Fonda Lee does an excellent job describing not only how jade works within the magic system itself, but the actual combat and martial arts element of it all was incredibly visual and just swept me away anytime I encountered a fight scene. Ugh, the drama, just the anticipation of it all was so great. Then obviously there's an underlining mystery, and just the escalation of this plot was mind-blowing. I could not put it down. I was captivated on page 1, and there's also just like great sprinklings of other things like romance and just like everything. But yeah, this was such an excellent example of amazing character work and inter-family drama and outer-family drama, combat, mystery, all of it. It was amazing and I cannot wait to read Jade War. I don't know how this book can escalate any further, but boy, am I excited to find out what is going to happen. But I gave Jade City 5 out of 5 stars. All right, next book I completed was The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is a science fiction parallel world traveling novel with a sapphic romance that was so good. Listen, I won't lie, I definitely have a soft spot for this sort of concept of parallel world travels, like multiple existences with only slight and minor changes. This book had that with more. This book also combined thriller elements and was also centered upon a main character that you can't help but love so much. Kara within this story was just a voice and a perspective that I enjoyed immensely reading from. But this basically, again, follows the main character Kara, and she lives in a world where multi-world travel is possible. There's a catch with multiverse travel in that you cannot visit another world if your body is still alive there. But for Kara, this has actually presented her a great opportunity, and why she's been so sought after is because she's actually been killed off on 372 different versions of Earth. However, things begin to escalate as her few remaining individuals on other Earths are also starting to be killed off. It sort of begins a thriller element where Kara is beginning to both question her employer, but also kind of diving a little bit deeper into the politics that are present within Wiley City and the wards outside of it. A little more context about this world too is that it's kind of set in this sort of futuristic, desolate desert landscape. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of Mad Max. And what I mean by that, there is the central city, Wiley City, where all the citizens are very much protected. The wards outside are controlled by really violent gangs, and all the citizens there are basically struggling for survival, but are also really interconnected in community. And that is where our main character Kara has grown up, but she was able to leave and possibly gain citizenship at Wiley City given her employment. This book artfully combines the science fiction elements as well as the societal critique that's present throughout this entire book. It really does this through Kara's traversing of the different worlds and her exploring these minutely different realities that could also be her reality and could impact her actual Earth Zero. It's absolutely fascinating. All that is also combined with one of the best intense, angsty, will they, won't they, sapphic centered romance in this book as well. I was dying about the romance throughout this entire book. Really, this was artfully crafted. I enjoyed it from page one. I will say it is very dark and has a variety of trigger warnings, so I definitely wanted to call that out. But all in all, I really liked this. This was also a debut, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I will definitely be checking out more books by this author as she releases them, because this was stellar. This is a book that completely melted my heart, turned me into a pile of goo, and I loved every single second of it, and that is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This is a queer love story following our main character Yadriel, whose parents is having a hard time accepting his gender. So to prove that he is a real brujo, he decides with the help of his cousin to essentially summon a ghost and help lead them to the afterlife. He and his family are essentially like gatekeepers helping the dead, so he decides to summon a ghost, but he accidentally summons the wrong ghost, and then enters Julian, the resident bad boy. And together they essentially make a bargain where Julian agrees to be able to be released after the Day of the Dead, not until Yadriel basically helps him tie up all of his loose ends, check in on his friends and family, which ultimately leads to Julian not really leaving Yadriel alone. This book was charming in every single way, shape, and form. It has magic, it has family, and it has just the cutest romance at its core. I flew through this. I was smiling the entire time. It has humor, truly everything you want. First and foremost, I loved the magical component. It was rooted in culture and family, and I really loved the different family relationships that were present. Don't get me wrong, they're very complicated, especially in regards to Yadriel wanting more direct acceptance from his family, but seeing his relationship with his close cousin Marcia was absolutely charming, and I loved them together so much. I thought the magic component of this was really thought out and added a wonderful driving plot force and central mystery to this story, but I'll say my favorite part of this whole book was definitely Yadriel and Julian's relationship. relationship. I loved it from page one. I love how they work together. I love their banter. They're very much opposites in personality, but are also so incredibly supportive and bring out the best of each other. Julian essentially pushes Yadriel to kind of question some of his fear and also gives him the confidence to really try things he perhaps have been putting off, whereas Yadriel is really helpful with Julian in terms of kind of understanding and communicating more about his emotions, especially as Julian sometimes struggles with anger. I really cannot articulate how beautiful this story is. It's a wonderful coming of age queer love stories with ghosts and magic and family at its core. I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. There was nothing that disappointed me about this book. It was just the best, and I will read everything by Aiden Thomas moving forward. I loved this book. From there, I also read Dragon Pearl by Yoon-ha Lee. This is a Rick Riordan Presents middle grade centered Korean mythology story. This story definitely diverts from the traditional maybe Rick Riordan formula that I normally encounter with his middle grade stories, but I still really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a great adventure and so much fun. This actually follows our main character Min, who lives on like a distant planet in the future. This is very much a real sci-fi kind of story. And Min and her family are actually guamos, which means they have fox magic, which allows them to charm objects, charm people, and actually transform themselves and things around them. Guamos in Min's world are generally speaking very mistrusted because of their ability to charm people. So her whole life, her mother has told Min to hide her magic and to never use it. However, at the beginning of the story, an investigator comes to Min's family home and tells her that her brother has defected from the Space Forces in search of the Dragon Pearl. This results in Min leaving home and going on an adventure to try to find and save her brother and also locate the Dragon Pearl, which is a mythical object that essentially provides the wielder like immense power. She hopes to use it to help her family and her home planet. This was a roaring good time. You follow Min as she's traversing all different types of obstacles. It has really cool magic. Not only do we have fox-centered magic, there's also dragon and other mythological creatures present in this world as well. This is a very sci-fi focused story. So for a large part of the book, we're actually in space on a spaceship, which was honestly very cool. There's also a lot of ghosts within this as well. Kind of is this sort of sci-fi meets paranormal experience. All in all, I thought the story was really fast-paced. Definitely engaged on page one. I do wish the pacing was maybe a little bit better and some of the ideas were fleshed out a bit more, but I would highly recommend this. It was a great first book in a series. I love middle grade. It was just a lot of fun. I just thought it had all the trappings of a good time, but I did give this a 3.75 out of 5 stars. Moving on to the last book I actually completed this month, and that is Becoming by Michelle Obama. I listened to the audiobook of this throughout the entire month, and it was an absolute joy. This book made me realize I need to read more memoirs because I was riveted and I was so emotionally connected to this entire story. This is Michelle Obama's life from childhood through the presidency. It was incredible. Also, the audiobook I would highly recommend because obviously Michelle Obama narrates all of it. I could listen to her all day. She could read me the dictionary and I would be fascinated. Her writing, her storytelling just captured me. Just learning about her life. I mean, like, I would listen to this and walk around like running errands and just be bawling my eyes out. I'd be laughing out loud. Like, I just felt enthralled. I felt so captured by just everything. It was truly a book so full of life, which feels very obvious because it's a memoir, but it's an inspiring novel because you feel the pain, the love, the hope, the drive that pushed her throughout her life. It was relatable, it was enlightening. I loved it. And again, I need to read more memoirs, but if you haven't read Becoming by Michelle Obama, I would highly recommend it. I feel like I'm one of the only people on the planet who hasn't read it at this point, but I loved it. It was great. Now to quickly run through the last 2 books on my wrap up. One was a DNF and one I'm just still in the process of reading. The first one, which is a very shocking and very disappointing DNF, is The Memory of Babel by Christelle Dabos. This obviously is a book and a series I've talked a lot about on my channel, but to say I was disappointed when I ultimately DNF'd this is quite the understatement. So my issues with this book and the reason why I DNF'd it, I cannot speak to the original author's intent nor the original language it was written in. I can only speak to the English translation in which I read it in. But basically, I found some very kind of problematic word choice that felt very out of left field and very unneeded. I feel like it's very much a translation issue, and it really just kept bringing me out of the story, and which is ultimately why I decided to put it down. But yeah, it's definitely something I hope they resolve in maybe later editions of this book. And if that's the case, I'll definitely check it out if they ultimately re-release it, but for now I've decided to DNF. And the last book I'm just going to quickly touch on is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I started my reread of this book this month. I I was only able to get to page 200, which if you know the length of this book, it's not very far, but I'm still pleased with the 200 pages I read. I obviously am loving this reread. I'm just trying to prepare myself for the 4th book, which is coming out in November. I don't think I'll be caught up in time, but I definitely do know I need to reread, because even the 200 pages I read, I realized how much I had forgotten. That being said, I do feel like I fell into this world so quickly and so easily. Brandon Sanderson's prose I feel like is really straightforward and direct and therefore really easy to consume and read. So please do not be intimidated by the size of these books. I personally find them to be very engaging. It's not difficult to read through at all, but obviously this is the first book to a very epic fantasy series. You follow a lot of different perspectives, but the primary perspectives in this first book are, one, a doctor turned soldier, a prince who's kind of remembering certain aspects of his past, a young girl who becomes a scholar's apprentice with the hope of stealing a powerful artifact to help save her family from economic ruin, and lastly, an assassin who weeps as he kills. This is a world full of politics and endless war. There's also cool magic, as well as like magical armor and weaponry. It has a lot. It has it all, to be honest. And yeah, I'm excited to continue reading this in the month of October and picking up book 2 as soon as I do finish it. But yeah, I read 200 pages of this, which I am jazzed with. Alrighty guys, those are all the books I read in the month of September. Let me know down below some books you've read recently, as I would love to know, and I will see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye!